true scary story. Night of Nahuales. Even though we're not twins. In any case, even though we're not identical, as you can imagine, we have a very strong connection. Special. In fact, this experience I'm about to share with you, I felt it to some extent, even before he told me about it. I felt this fear, this desperation from what happened that night. My brother listens to night stories too, but he asked me to write this story, and I will do so, respecting all his wishes. What he told me. So this is for you, bro. What I'm about to tell you happened in Oaxaca, in February 2020. A posse put out a call. Help from a ghost town, a settlement of a few houses that hadn't been inhabited for over a year. No one. It was an area somewhat under siege by paramilitary groups, which led to its closure. Everyone was running away. My brother's company answered the call. It was early morning, and they found members of the squad locked in one of the barricaded houses, and truly scared. Frankly, they were terrified. He tells me that they found brave men, the kind who were willing to stand up to death without a second thought, following orders, scared like a child, trembling, thanking God when they saw their colleagues arrive. Everyone was scared, and only one of them. They managed to explain what was happening, and why they were hiding there, what they had experienced that night. The corporal explained to them that they were patrolling the area. They had left the town some time ago, but decided to look around, that no one was hiding or looting what was left in the houses. There, their attention was caught by a skinny dog, who approached them without fear, as if expecting water, food or anything else, a pat on the head, anything. They felt sorry for them, as the people left, half the night to save their lives, the lives of their children. Sometimes animals are left alone, and it was obvious that if there were other dogs left, he was the only one who survived. And who knows how, because it was obvious he hadn't eaten for a whole week. They gave him something to eat, thinking that he wouldn't survive the night. They took out what they had brought to give him. They knew he wouldn't survive the night, so they decided to eat. They stayed with him for a while, petting him. They couldn't play with the poor dog, because he had no strength, but they didn't want him to die alone. They gave him water, but it was too late. It seemed he was waiting for them, because as soon as they went to get him, they immediately followed him. When he reached the place that he thought was his home, the poor thing lay down to sleep in the doorway. He woke us up. The soldier said that he missed the dog, and couldn't stop thinking about him. He imagined what it would be like to see him in the place of that poor abandoned animal. He thought about how much pain it would hurt him if they were afraid that his father would die like this. So they decided to bury him there, in the place where he used to live. And while they were digging the hole and filling it, night fell when they poured the last shovel of earth on top. Quite unexpectedly, everyone felt something. Let's call it a premonition. But they felt danger was near. It was so obvious that they took up arms. Although they could not yet see anything, they almost without thinking took up a defensive position. And then they heard how an abandoned house appeared out of the darkness in front of them. It seemed like something was approaching. From behind the old wooden boards, they saw something peeking out. Their first thought was that it was another abandoned dog, its ears and eyes shining brightly. But then it fully revealed its head, and it became clear that it was not a dog. The size, the color, the ears. It was a coyote. A huge coyote peered out, waiting. They yelled at it, but it didn't react. Someone picked up a rock, threw it, and it hit a piece of wood just inches from the animal's muzzle. But the animal didn't react, not a bit. It didn't move at all, and it worried them that it wasn't scared. Coyotes usually avoid contact with people and run away at the slightest threat, but this one didn't. On the contrary, it stood up. It revealed itself. Then they realized it wasn't just a coyote anymore. It was something else. It was something that had stopped. 2 legs, like a man, and tall, very tall. But the head, the arms, it was obvious that this wasn't a man, a monster, but something they had never seen before. Something they couldn't see, understand. Shots were fired into the air. To be again, he remained motionless, unperturbed. They understood that if he wasn't afraid of the shots, it was because they had no intention of provoking him. There was more to him. One of the soldiers shouted curses. Another began to pray. Without thinking twice, they retreated and took refuge in the house where they had buried the dog. They heard movement at the door. One of them realized that something out there wanted to dig, the dog, and the shot. I didn't know what they wanted this body for, but I wasn't going to let them use it for that. something bad, or that it would eat him, or whatever reason he had for wanting to bury him. After the shooting, they saw him run through the window, back to the abandoned houses. At that point, they still didn't want to send out distress signals. It seemed wrong to them. They said they thought they could handle the situation themselves, but in reality, they were ashamed. A few minutes later, they heard shouts. The shouts of several men who looked like they were talking to each other, moving between the houses, communicating with each other. These were shouts in the Mixtec language, which they knew well. They lost sight of the dirt road. They saw it for a moment right in front of them, and that was enough for them to realize they were surrounded. Coyotes were sitting there, like ordinary animals, but of unusual size. They were communicating with the animals of the area. They managed to see several of them sitting in. They dispersed to different places around the house. They did not react to the insults they were shouting, or to the shots fired into the air. They also did not leave, because two soldiers inside were praying for God's protection. On the contrary, the latter made them laugh. Laughter came from outside. It seemed to echo for all to hear. Laughter that then mingled with words they did not understand, which undoubtedly mocked their fear. For a moment, there was complete silence. Silence, all around. It seemed as if they had finally left. As if they would have a chance to get out of there, and run to their truck on the outskirts of the city. But there were doubts, because although no one wanted to express them, no one wanted to say it out loud. They knew they were in the land of the Nahuales. It was well known that there were many of them in this area, but of course no one believed them. You shouldn't believe until there is no other choice. This is what they were discussing when one of the soldiers, he heard something. He leaned against the wall and came closer, convinced that something was touching the window, but it was not so. Shining a lamp, he saw a hand stretched between the boards of the door. It was not a paw or an animal claw. A very long hand with slender fingers. He's covered in black hair, but with nails, similar to human ones. The hand was searching for the latch. Open. Shots rang out. There was radio traffic. The desperate call my brother answered. The same one that led to his terrified discovery of the dead. And perhaps no one would have believed the story, if it weren't for the fact that he wouldn't have learned anything from reading it. While they were listening to this story, dozens of soldiers were rescued. From the darkness, eyewitnesses' screams surrounded them, as if letting them know that everything happening around them. He told them what really happened. My brother came only to witness, from this story, from the fear they experienced. But it was enough to frighten me, to understand that something very strange was happening nearby. And it was because of one incident with my grandfather. We both believed in water from early childhood. It is something we believe in, and respect. That is why that tense moment, which also reminded him of many things from our childhood. At that moment, I also felt it, hundreds of kilometers away, in another city. I felt the same fear my brother experienced that night. And I understand, that Nayal are a string, folklore, legends for many, but please pay attention to the following howling at night, especially if they are alone in the middle of a deserted city, or even worse, if they hear it. In the forest, you never know what awaits you. Have a good rest, and a good night, everyone.